Welcome to the Sex Science Podcast, where we turn the latest peer-reviewed research on intimacy and sexuality into fun, accessible conversations. Generated by AI and fact-checked by experts, the Sex Science Podcast was created by LaShaw to empower you through knowledge. So, join us as we explore pleasure, relationships, human connection, and everything in between.
All right, let's dive into something we all think about from time to time. Penis size.
Oh, yeah. It's a big one. Literally and figuratively, I guess.
We got a ton of research on this, spanning decades, so we're going deep. We'll uncover the truth about average penis size and debunk some myths along the way. Get ready, because you might be surprised by what you don't know.
Yeah, there are definitely some misconceptions floating around out there.
Speaking of misconceptions, like those locker room stories, those bragging sessions, how much truth is there to all that, really?
Well, that's where the research gets really interesting. One thing it highlights is something called social desirability bias.
Okay, break that down for us. Social desirability bias, what's that all about?
It basically means that people tend to, exaggerate a little, especially when it comes to sensitive topics.
Like penis size.
Exactly. So when you're relying on self-reported measurements, chances are they are a bit inflated.
Yeah, I can see that. Even if someone's measuring at home, are they being totally objective? I mean, come on.
Exactly. And what's even funnier is that even researchers themselves have fallen prey to this bias.
No way. Really?
Yeah, some early studies relied heavily on self-reporting or even photographs.
Pictures. Really?
I know, right? But as you can imagine, that led to some overestimations.
Okay, so if we can't trust those locker room boasts or even some of the early research, how do scientists actually get accurate measurements?
Well, it's a delicate process.
I bet it is. I have to admit, I'm kind of curious about the logistics of it all.
So there are two main methods they use: measuring an erect penis.
Okay.
And measuring a stretched, flaccid penis.
I'm guessing the stretched method is a bit less awkward, huh? For everyone involved.
Yeah, you could say that. It's definitely less invasive. But even with these more standardized methods, there's still a margin for error.
Oh, I can imagine. It's not like you can just slap a ruler on there and call it a day.
Exactly. Right? It's not that simple. You've got to consider tension, the temperature of the room,
right.
All sorts of things.
Oh, wow. That's fascinating. So even the most rigorous studies have to acknowledge those limitations.
Absolutely. It's a good reminder that science is always evolving, always refining its methods.
True. But with that said, the research does give us some pretty valuable insights into what's considered average.
It does.
Okay, enough with the buildup. Let's get to the numbers. What does the research actually say about the average erect penis size?
All right, drum roll, please. Well, if we look at the data, table 1 from those research papers, the average erect length is somewhere between 5.1 and 5.5 inches.
So picture a smartphone.
Basically. Not quite those mythical proportions some people might imagine.
No, not at all.
To put that into perspective, only about 12% of men actually have a penis longer than 6.3 inches. When erect, of course.
That's incredible. I bet those numbers are going to surprise a lot of people. But, here's the thing. Is average really all that matters when it comes to, this topic?
That's the big question, isn't it? And it's one we'll definitely explore. Yeah, average is just one data point. The research actually dives into that, the psychological side of things, how men perceive their own size and how that impacts their well-being.
I can only imagine.
And what's fascinating is that many men who think they're below average, they actually fall within the normal range.
So it's more about perception than reality.
A lot of the time, yeah.
I mean, I guess that makes sense. Media, societal pressures, all that stuff can really mess with your head.
Absolutely. We're constantly bombarded with images, often airbrushed, unrealistic images. And it creates this distorted view of what's normal or what's, desirable.
Right. It's like that whole comparison is the thief of joy thing.
Exactly.
Makes you wonder how many people are out there stressing over something that's totally normal.
Probably a lot.
But okay, if size isn't the be-all and end-all, what can men do if they're still, struggling with those feelings? What does the research say about that?
Well, counseling can be surprisingly helpful.
Counseling?
Yeah, these studies show that talking to a therapist can really help men address those anxieties.
That makes sense, actually.
It helps them gain a healthier perspective on their bodies.
I guess sometimes you just need someone to help you unpack all those societal messages and help you build a more positive self-image.
Exactly. And it's not just about feeling better about yourself. It can actually improve sexual satisfaction, too.
Oh, that's interesting. So it's about recognizing that size is just one piece of the puzzle, right? When it comes to sexual experience.
Right. There's so many other factors at play.
Okay, so we've debunked some myths. We talked about the importance of seeking help if you need it. But what about those men who are considering more drastic measures?
Like surgery.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did the research touch on that at all?
It did, and it's a tricky one. What's interesting is that the studies found that most men seeking these procedures, they actually have penises that are already, within the normal range.
Wow. So again, it comes back to perception versus reality.
It really does.
It seems like counseling would be crucial in those cases, right? Like a first step.
Absolutely. Surgery always carries risks, potential complications.
Right.
So it's essential to address the underlying psychological stuff first.
So it's about making informed decisions, prioritizing overall well-being, not just physical changes.
Exactly. If anyone's considering these procedures, talk to qualified medical professionals first. Get the facts.
Good advice. I also found it fascinating that the research went into the history of, penis size research. It seems like this is a topic that's intrigued scientists for centuries.
Oh, absolutely. It's a field with a long and colorful history, you could say.
Okay, give us some highlights. What are some of the more interesting historical tidbits?
Well, for one, the methods they used to measure, they've evolved a lot over time. Early studies often relied on, you guessed it, self-reporting or even crude illustrations.
Those exaggerated illustrations.
Yeah.
We talked about those, yeah. But then science marched on. Things became more standardized, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Researchers started using more objective methods. They moved away from self-measurement and brought in trained clinicians.
So less guesswork, more hands-on data collection.
Right. And as the methods got more rigorous, the data got more reliable.
I bet those mythical proportions started to shrink down to a more realistic size.
They did. It's a great example of how scientific understanding is always evolving, always refining itself.
It makes you realize that this whole conversation isn't just about size. It's about challenging those unrealistic beauty standards in general.
Absolutely.
It's about promoting inclusive and accepting understanding of male bodies, one that celebrates diversity and recognizes that true confidence comes from within, not from external validation.
Well said.
It's about shifting the focus from bigger is better to appreciating the unique beauty of, each individual.
It's a message that's especially important today, don't you think?
Yeah.
I mean, with all the images and messages out there.
Definitely. It's about fostering self-acceptance, and recognizing that there's no one-size-fits-all standard of beauty.
Absolutely. Diversity is natural, it's beautiful, and that applies to everything, including penis size.
It's been a journey. From the science to societal pressures to mental well-being.
We've covered a lot.
Yeah. It strikes me that while we've been focusing on the male experience, this all kind of raises questions about how this stuff impacts women, too.
Oh, for sure. It's all interconnected, right?
Mm-hmm.
The pressure on men to conform, it can definitely influence how women see themselves and their partners.
It makes you think about how we can promote a healthier, more inclusive view of body image for everybody, regardless of gender.
Absolutely. Moving beyond those narrow definitions, celebrating diversity.
So to wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave our listener with a final thought. Now that you've heard the facts, debunked some myths, explored the psychology, the culture, how does this change your perspective on that whole size matters conversation?
It challenges us to examine our own beliefs, doesn't it? Think critically about the messages we've internalized from society.
It's about realizing that satisfaction, intimacy, it all comes from a much deeper place than just physical attributes.
Connection, communication, respect.
Exactly. So, to our listener, thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
We hope you've gained some valuable insights.
Just feel empowered to challenge those unrealistic expectations.
Because remember, there's no one-size-fits-all. Embrace your individuality. Celebrate the diversity.
It's the human experience.
Thank you for listening to the Sex Science Podcast brought to you by LaShaw. We hope that you learned something new about the wonderful world of human intimacy and sexuality, and join us next time as we dive into more fascinating research. And remember, science is for you. Music for this podcast was produced by SOUNDRAW.